All right. Hi, everyone. Good morning. How's everyone doing? Ready to do some React and Redux? Cool. So as discussed over our previous workshops, we wanted to build like a sort of a fancier app that we've been building. So one of the ideas that Debrina had, I think, was like a Yelp app where you could essentially talk to the Yelp API and then do something with it. So in this case, we would try to build like a Tinder for Yelp restaurants, so like and dislike. So we're going to start with that. How do you feel about that? Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
And we're going to use React and Redux from the get-go. So there may be situations where you may not understand something. So feel free to interrupt me and be like, I don't understand what's going on. And we can go over exactly what's happening. I wouldn't mind repeating myself 100 times. So even if I've said it before and if you just don't understand it, please feel free and tell me that I don't understand and I can repeat it. Until you do that, I wouldn't know if you're following or not. Yeah? Did you do that?
Yes.
Cool. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to clone our awesome repo. So it's github.com, Stephen Grider, and Redux Simple Starter. So the reason why we want to pick this is because it abstracts away some of the things that you don't want to think about, like Webpack and this whole other abyss of stuff that you can talk about forever. So we're just going to avoid that and just have a nice, clean directory. So let's go ahead and clone this project. And you can actually specify the folder name of the project after the git clone command. So let's call it Yelp Picker or Yelp Restaurant Picker. Restaurant Picker. Sure. Is that better?
What are we calling it?
I call it Yelp Restaurant Picker. You can call it that as well or something else. Cool. I'm going to clone that. And
you said you're going to block the...
I should. Okay. So it's stephengrider.com/ okay, I'm going to do it on the careers thing so that way everyone has it. Yes.
You know that my squad is named the Griderettes?
Did we officially decide?
Yeah.
I love it.
You know, the only person who didn't approve was Jose, and he lost his vote when he left us for a job.
Hey.
Oh.
He's gonna miss out. Cool. Okay, so once we do that, let's do an npm I. That way it takes some time. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do even before we write any code is do some upfront design work on how we want to structure our application. So I'm going to use the whiteboard here.
There's a lot of deprecated stuff in here, Plummy.
That's fine. Don't worry about it. We're not going to use Jade. It's talking about Jade.
Babel.
Okay. That's better. Cool. So we essentially want, like, how do we want the app to look? So let's say this is our browser. We want to be given two options here, right? Like maybe like a picture of the restaurant or the name, maybe. This could be like Burma Superstar.
Are you using the API?
Yeah.
The name, the rating?
The rating, maybe number of stars, and then maybe location,
Mm-hmm.
and then how many dollars it is, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's say we have the same thing for another restaurant here. Let's say.
You're only giving Dulce 2 stars, huh?
And let's say this. And then what do we want? Like a checkbox here.
What is the point of this again? This app?
So the application is like you open your app and it automatically provides a restaurant that you want to go to, or maybe just one restaurant, and it tells you whether you want to go there. And if you say no, it'll give you something else. It keeps suggesting a restaurant until you find something that you like.
Like Tinder?
So like Tinder,
Yeah,
like,
it's kind of
I would
Tinder.
eat there. I would eat there.
Oh, we're
So it's like
okay.
so that way you don't have to like have a cognitive load of like trying to find a restaurant and pick the cuisine. It just suggests something based on your location.
Okay.
So you need like the checkbox, is that for yes or no?
Yeah. So do we want two options or do we just want one option to be like, I don't want this?
I think one.
You just want,
You
right?
get
Okay,
one,
that's just
if
simple.
you like it or not.
Okay. So yes or no. Let's start with two buttons in the beginning and then we can be fancy and do swipes. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, so if that's the case, we want some sort of a container or a component for our restaurant, right? And then let's say we want some component for our, what do we want to call this component?
The checkboxes.
Checkbox, or maybe like we can come up with a, maybe it's more not a checkbox, more like a button, right?
Okay.
So
Mm-hmm.
think of something, some name, and then we need an outer container or component. We can call it the app component.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what's going to happen is when the app loads, so on load, make a call to Yelp API and use current location to find restaurants. And then use the list of restaurants. Use the list of restaurants to build a pipeline of suggestions. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then pick the first one. So if pick the first one, okay. Another display the first one. Okay, so what happens when a user clicks on yes? What do you want to do?
Send them to directions to this? Is that too extra?
Like you mean like using the Maps API? Like
Yeah.
Okay, we can. So let's say features, right? So features is as a user, I should be able to find a restaurant that I like. But actually, the find is actually not a right verb. It's more like
Select.
So yeah, select.
Maybe not open up the maps exactly because I think that's a lot. Maybe just show them the address and prompt them to copy, and paste.
Yeah, sure. That can be like version 2 if you want to do the map situation. that's the doing MVP. So once.
Can I take them to their website?
Sure, we can think about the different options. But once I select the restaurant, I see details of the restaurant. Let's just say that for now.
Okay.
Okay. Cool. So let's start with that. Okay, so let's open Atom.
Does that even make it better? No.
You want the lights off? Yeah.
Okay. How's the font size? Is that you want it bigger?
Yeah.
How do I make it bigger? Does anyone know how to make fonts bigger in Atom? In
Not
preferences?
over on the left. You can only do it over on the right.
Oh,
The
okay.
VS Code is good.
You can do both.
VS
sides.
Code is the new Python. Also, Puneet, just tip on a projector, it's a lot easier to read black on white than white on black.
Okay.
So yeah.
The code does increase sizes to Command plus.
It'll only
So
do
wait, so let's see.
Only
Can anyone see this?
Yeah.
It's okay, right? Yeah. It's fine, Money.
So
Thank
much
you.
feedback.
Too many cooks in the room. Okay. So let's start. So we decided like this is what we want. This is kind of like the component structure that we want, right? So let's start by creating those files. So we already have app.js, right? So that was our outermost component according to our diagram. So let's create 2 more files. So we can call one restaurant. Restaurant.js. And
React.
what's that?
It's the only thing I know. Import React from React.
Oh yeah. And then let's also create another file. So so what do we want to call that component? Did we say checkbox is not a good game?
It's Biden's choice.
So restaurant select buttons.js. Is that okay? Okay, I have a typo here, so rename. All right, so let's open restaurant.js and let's say import React component from React. Export default class restaurant. I'm just like returning some mock JSX.
Does it matter if there's a space between rendering the friends?
Oh, here? No. But yeah, usually projects would have a linter and there would be some rows. Yeah, so usually you don't have a space here, but it doesn't matter. It ignores white space. All white space is ignored in JavaScript. Okay, so we have essentially created a component here, a restaurant component. And let's do the same with the other component as well. So let's copy this whole file. Let me know if folks are still working on this file. Is everyone good with this file? Okay, so let's copy this whole file, the contents of this file, and then let's paste that in here. And then we'll replace restaurant with restaurant select buttons.
Me?
Yeah.
You have to write extends component.
Oh, yes, thank you. We do the same thing here too. Extends component. Cool. So now we have like two components that we have. And we want to sort of render those two components in our app component. Because if you look at our diagram, we essentially have the app component being the parent, and then the restaurant and the button component are children of that parent component. So in order to like do that, we want to import both those components. So we want to say import restaurant from, we want to say import restaurant select buttons from restaurant select buttons.
I see the restaurant select button.
Sure.
Oh yeah, okay.
So right now we're just faking this component and just like, rendering some statics HTML. So once we import these two things, what do we need to do?
You need to, in your app, put the components in the return.
We need to initialize our components. So we want to say restaurant, oops, and then restaurant select buttons. Yeah?
Should they go inside the if?
Yes. So I have to do this, and we can get rid of our. Everyone with me? Any questions so far? So everyone knows what we have done so far. We have essentially created new components. Independently, they render some static HTML, and then we're just adding those two of those components into our app component as children. And now, because our root component is app, all of our components are going to render, because that's going to trigger the rendering of app, which is going to trigger the rendering of our children, which are going to be the restaurants component and the restaurant with buttons component. Yeah, so let's try that out. Let's do an npm start in our terminal. And then let's go to localhost 8080.
Hey.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, does it work for everybody? Everybody sees those two lines? Okay, we're done. Let's go back. All right, so some of you would have already like worked with this project structure. So you notice that there's all these different directories called actions and reducers. We're going to like touch up upon these two things in a bit. You can just ignore those two things for now.
Can I see your app.js file?
Sure. So we just like imported both our files on line 2 and 3, and we are essentially initializing both those components. This is literally like, think of it as like calling the render function of your component. The syntax here maps to calling your render function. Okay. So, so if you look at our restaurant component, ideally what we would like is so it's more like we want to have some visual thinking when we are writing code. We essentially like wishing if this existed. So we essentially want a way to say, oh, I wish this component got props from somewhere about what restaurant is currently being rendered. And then just based on that assumption and based on that visual thinking, you can start designing your component. So if we know that we want to show the name of the restaurant, how many ratings that the restaurant has, the location and the cost of it, we have to make some assumptions about it, right? So we're going to wish and make an assumption that all of that data is going to be available as props in this component. Does that make sense? So we're going to make an assumption that all of our restaurant data is available as props. So this.props.name would be the name of the restaurant. This.props.location would potentially be the location. This is just an assumption. I don't know if it's going to be true or not. It may not be true. It may be true. And then we're going to fix our code based on whether the assumption was correct. But the reason why we do this is because then if we make this assumption, then we can provide some fake data, and then we can have some stuff working on the front end. And we can get a sense of like, okay, this is how it's all sort of connected together. So we're going to start with our assumption, and we're going to say, we're going to put our, so we're not going to do much styling now. We're just going to have some, just the name for now. So we're going to say name is this.props.name. What else do we need? We need rating. Oops. We need the location. And then what else do we need? We need maybe the cost. So I don't know if any of this is true. Like, I don't know what the Yelp actually sends back.
Why is location highlighted yellow?
Because you need a comma? No.
No, it's probably just confused. Maybe location is, what's that? Right. Yes.
It's not really related to this. How do you stop something that's running already on a port? And you don't really know where observed is.
You can potentially run the netstat command. That essentially, so if you Google that, it'll tell you how to see which process is using a port. So were you playing around with this repo before, like in some other project maybe?
No, there's like something running on port 80.
8080?
Yeah, it's the rethink database.
Oh, reading DB. So you can just say brew services stop reading DB.
Cool, thank you.
Cool. Okay. So so notice that we've sort of like repeated this .prop so many times, it's kind of painful. So what you can do is just destructure this .props and just get name, rating, location, and cost out of this .props. And then we can sort of get
And then everything just goes down the name, right?
yeah, so it just becomes name, rating, location, and cost. Brianna, did that work?
Trying to figure out the right way to stop.
So brew space services space stop space rethink DB.
That didn't work.
So if you do a brew services list, do you see rethink DB is running?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe try brew services stop space rethink DB. It's the other way around. Cool. Okay. So let's like refresh our page. And you see there's like emptiness. So notice that we're not seeing any name or rating. It's like it's so if I were to console log this.props in restaurant, and refresh the page, it's essentially an empty object, right? Which is why then this.props.name would be undefined, or null, I guess, in this case. They'll all be null.
We get or set props off of state. Is that right? How do we?
Good question. We're not there yet.
Okay.
We're pretending that they exist
Yeah.
right now.
No.
So look at where we are initializing our component. So in React, you can pass props. So you can essentially pass props. That's what you're doing in React. You're passing props, and the props can only come from one direction, which is from above. Like it's like coming from the heaven. Right? It's being hailed down. So the only place which is above restaurant in our app is app, the component app. Right? If you look at our diagram there, like restaurant is a child of app.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only place that potentially that props can come down in React. So one way to pass down props is to directly do that. So we can essentially say name is Burma Superstar. What are the other options? Rating is 5 stars because I like Burma Superstar.
Puneet, were these props off of the select buttons or off of restaurants?
Yeah.
Oh, my bad. Thank you. Okay, so, and then location is Berkeley.
It's a hook one.
What was the other one?
Ah.
Yeah, there's,
Okay.
there's one in Alameda too.
Location, and then what is the last one? Was it cost?
See, and cost is just gonna be dollar signs, right?
Let's just say this for now. Yeah. So now, everyone with me?
Almost.
So we're essentially just passing down props. Because like we're passing down these key value pairs in our restaurant component, those key value pairs are going to be collected together and available to you in this object called this.props, which is why now you can access this.props.name, this.props.rating, this.props.location, etc. If we were passing down different things here, like if we were passing down restaurant name, then we would have to use the corresponding value in the in this component. So we would have to say this.props.restaurant name. So there has to be a one-to-one matching of whatever you're sending down. Okay, so when we refresh our page, hopefully we see some names. Okay.
So if when we call restaurant in the app
Mm-hmm.
component, if we had another prop like I don't know, comment or something, but we didn't use that prop in the child component,
Mm-hmm.
Would it still function?
Good question. So did everyone understand her question? So the question is, there's nothing stopping us from sending like 20 props here, right? We can send like as many as we want. And there's no reason why we could not want to use like just 2 out of the 20. We could, or I just care about the name, for example. And that's completely fine. It's essentially just like you have an object and you can access whatever you want. You want to access the whole thing, that's fine. If you want to access just one thing, that's fine too. So if I just want to, let's say I didn't want to show the cost, that's fine. Everything else would still be true. This function would execute. So you always have to think about the render function is the function that executes when you do this. And do you have all of the information that you need for this render function to successfully render itself? Or we're like, okay, we're only using name, rating, and location. And if I just have those 3 things, I'm good enough. And that is just a simplified explanation of, just the render function is being executed. There's some other stuff happening behind the scenes as well, which we'll see later. But for now, you can just be like, what you see is what you get. So you're only seeing render. So only think about making render work. If render successfully executes and you have this.props having all of the right values, then you're going to return the right data in there. So you're going to return cost as well. Awesome, good question. Cool. So now we're able to like essentially send in some props. And then we want to do some stuff with our buttons. So at this point we have some props, right? And but we essentially need to get some data from somewhere. So we need an idea of we need to introduce a new idea called state in here. So state is essentially anything that changes. So in our app, if you look at it, what changes?
The restaurant.
The restaurant details, like information about which restaurant I'm currently viewing is constantly changing. So that essentially has to be state that comes from somewhere. We don't know yet. Again, we're going to do some visual thinking and we're going to see like, okay, we have some state that's available to us. I'm going to jump the gun a little bit and I'm going to, so this is going to be maybe a little confusing. I'm going to start talking about where reducers fit in and Redux fits in. So some of you may have had the experience of like working with React state, with just the component state. So React has its own way of creating state. So for example, in my own constructor, I can create a constructor function here. And I'm going to call super of props. And then I can say this dot state equal to empty object. So this is local state to the component. And then I have functions like set state to modify this state. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing something slightly different. So if you think about our app, we have the restaurant that we are currently viewing, and then we also want to keep track of a restaurant if we have selected a restaurant, right? Like if you think about it, if you imagine like how my restaurant would behave, and if I was the computer and if I was the app itself, what would I need to remember, right? If I let's say I'm the human version of the app and I'm talking to somebody and you're essentially asking me, or rather I'm supposed to tell you that this is a restaurant option for you. And then you're going to be like, either I like it or I don't like it. And if you say I don't like it, then I show you something new, a different restaurant. And I keep doing this until you say, yes, I like this restaurant. And now I have this information that, yes, let's say I'm playing this game with Steph. And then Steph is like, I want to go to, Mua. And now the app as a person, if I'm the app, then I'll be like, okay, Steph is now going to go to Mua. Like that's information that I know. And I may also know that Steph took looked at 20 restaurants before she settled on Mua. Like that is the information, and that's the state that I, as the app, would need to store. Right? I could go back in time and be like, oh, what were the different options that I selected? That could be a feature, maybe. But you have to start thinking of the app in that way, to think about like, what is the different information that I need to store? Like if I were the app, what would I need to store?
You need to store whether the user is saying yes or not.
Okay.
For the state of the user instance.
Right, but let's say looking at the features right now. So the features are, as a user, I should be able to select a restaurant, right? I need to be able to select a restaurant. And once I select the restaurant, I need to see the details of the restaurant. That's all the features that I have right now. What you're saying is like, I want to like be able to see whether I said yes or no is like an extra feature. Let's assume that's not right now. So given those two features, what do I need to save?
You just need to save all the restaurants in an array, right?
Okay, and doing that would solve what?
Well, so that you can make sure, as long as you don't randomly select from the array, just to make sure you're not repeating. Like, okay, they said no, so then we go to the next one. They said no, we go to the next one.
Got it. So you want to be able to not repeat restaurants. So you want to know what has the user seen already. Because I don't want to suggest the same restaurant again. I don't want to say no twice. Those are the only option. You go to Mua. Okay. Cool. So that's a good discovery. The features didn't say that. Right? That was an insight that we got through like our working with the app. Because like I don't want to see the restaurant twice. So that could be like a bug in your specs to say like that should be essentially explicitly listed out that a user should not be shown the same restaurant twice. As a user, I should not see the same restaurant twice. So that now we added a modification to our spec. So let's go ahead and write that. So as a user, should not see actually more than once is better. Okay. So that's the case. So Stephanie, you were saying that you want to keep track of all the restaurants that the user has seen so far in an array. Okay.
Or a doubly linked list.
Or a doubly linked list. Okay. Let's go with array for now. So let's create a comment here. Oops. So app state, we want to keep track of. So think of like the app state is always an object. And then there's different like keys on the object representing different things that you want to store. So in our case, we want to say restaurants. See. right?
Mhm.
Oops. How did that happen?
It just takes a second.
Maybe I'll plug it.
Yeah, I mean, cool. Am I sharing my screen? No.
Oh, hello.
Hey, I'm just trying to share my screen.
Okay.
And then... Okay, going back here. Yeah, did you have a question? Yeah, it is recording. I think that it never stopped recording, so this may be a blank for like 5 minutes. Or with Amin on the call. I hope you were entertaining everybody, Amin.
Maybe.
All right, so So restaurants seen so far. So that's what we want. Restaurants seen, and then we want to have an array of restaurants. So let's say maybe the list of IDs or something. And it's going to be like ABCD. Right? It will be an array.
Mm-hmm.
And then we want to have the current restaurant, which is an object,
Mm-hmm.
which would be used to populate the view. And what else do we need?
Don't we need restaurants to be seen?
Okay.
Are we going to store those, or are they just going
We don't know.
to? Okay.
But yes, potentially like restaurants. Okay. What else? What happens when a user says yes?
It needs to go to the information page for that restaurant.
Right. So do we need to save that information in a state?
Oh, yeah.
What's that?
Liked restaurants?
Right. So a restaurant selected. Because you can only select one restaurant at a time, maybe.
Yes.
And then if you refresh the app, it kind of like resets. Or maybe for now it resets. Maybe in the future we can save that information as well. So you don't. So restaurant selected is an object as well. So what you kind of need to get good at is imagining the shapes of the data that you're saving. So like knowing that you want to like store a list of restaurants that you've seen already. So that should indicate that it's an array of things. And then the next question is like, what should I store in the array? So since we chose to just select the ID, because do I need to store the whole restaurant, or can I just store the ID? Like the question you have to ask yourself is like, what are we trying to solve? Are we trying to so just to solve the problem of like, I don't want to see the same restaurant twice is enough to store just the ID, because every time I have an option of showing a restaurant to the user, I can check to see if that ID has been shown before. And if it has, then it's like, okay, don't show it. But let's say I want to like go back in my history and see all of the restaurants that I've seen, then just storing the IDs is not enough. Right? So yeah, question.
So like for current restaurant and restaurant selected, we're not using an array because it's just one. And then current restaurants, like the one that's viewed but hasn't been selected yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then restaurant selected will only be like the one.
Exactly.
That's just selected. Okay.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So which is why this is an array. And if you want to solve the problem of seeing the restaurants that I've seen before, then you may have to store something else. You may want to store the whole thing, or even the IDs is enough. And then there's a way using the ID, and then you can see more details about the restaurant. There's many ways you can solve the problem. It's just about like what is the specifications and what are you trying to do at this point?
Wouldn't we look for a unique key value pair that's when we get to the API part?
What do you mean?
Well, we're saying we're going to store the restaurant ID, but we're assuming that there's going to be an ID in the when we
Yes.
pull that information with the
Mhm.
API.
Yeah.
But we could also just look to see like what are the unique keys in there, right?
And what is the problem you're trying to solve here?
Oh, I don't know. There's no problem.
No, I mean in the sense of like which part of the spec that you're trying to
Oh,
solve.
I was looking at restaurant scene IDs where you were saying if we only have the ID, it's going to be really hard to go back and look at our history of restaurants we've seen.
Yeah. Because just with the ID, it's not enough information about like what is the name of a restaurant,
Got you.
right? Like if, let's say we want to have a history tab where we can see like, oh, these were the options which were suggested and I said no to them.
Got you.
Just with this current app state, it's not going to be possible to successfully implement that feature.
Got you.
So based on the features and based on your app, you should be able to like tell what kinds of problems can you solve, because this is literally the whole state that's available to you. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Like all of your specs, if you have to look at your state and then look at your specs and see, can I solve my problem? So let's explicitly write the specs down. So the specs were as a user, I should be able to select a restaurant. Oops, not restaurant to be seen. And then the second one was once I select a restaurant, I should see the details of the restaurant. Why does it keep auto-completing? And as a user, I should not see the restaurant once. So these are the 3 specs that I have. So do they get satisfied with the state that we have right now? So let's look at the first one. As a user, I should be able to select the restaurant.
Yes.
Do I have a way to see what the restaurant is selected? Yes, the current restaurant. Oh, actually, no, restaurant selected. And no, actually, no, it is the current restaurant, which is like the one which is currently being shown. I haven't selected one yet. But once I select a restaurant, I should see the details. So that once I select it, that essentially gets stored to the restaurant selected. So that way I know that this is the restaurant that has been chosen. And then as a user, I should not see a restaurant more than once, and we're solving that by saving the IDs of the restaurant scene. So you're looking at each spec and you're seeing whether you're solving the problem and whether the app state has all of the information to solve that problem. Okie dokes. All right, so we kind of have to like look at Yelp now because we're going to making calls to the Yelp API. So let's look at Yelp API. So we may have to sign up for this.
How did you phrase it earlier? You said that you should be able to look at state and see that you meet all your specs.
Yeah. And that's the process that we went through. So looking at each spec, you look at the state to see whether you have that information to be able to answer the question for that step.
Gotcha.
Okay. Cool. So how do we sign up for it? So
I
general.
think you have to log in to Yelp.
Got it. So let's log in with Google. Oh, actually, no, I need to sign up first. Sign up with Google.
So we all have to do that step.
Yeah, because we all need the API key. So we're going to call Yelp restaurant. What do we call it? Picker. Okay, I've read and accepted.
Did you Fusion API, right?
It's yelp.com/developer/v3. Yeah, Yelp Fusion.
Is this right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
When developers apply V3?
And
So if you just Google for Yelp API and the first link, you just click on that and
then how did you get create app?
yeah, create app.
And you just called it exactly what you called it. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't matter because you're just going to use, this is just for like it's metadata about the app. You're going to get the API key and that's all you're going to use. Okay, so I'm going to create new app. Oh.
School. I don't want emails from Yelp.
An app which picks restaurants. Cool. So we essentially get the API key, client ID. So let's create a new file in here. We're going to call it config.js. We're going to say I created a new file called Yelp _config inside of source. In source.
Where the hell? In source.
Yelp _config. Dot what? Okay.
It's called Yelp config.js.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was everyone able to create the Yelp app and at least get the client secret or the client ID and the API key?
And then you would just require that in your app class
Yeah, eventually.
eventually.
Wherever we are making those API calls.
What's this client thing?
Which client thing? The client ID?
Yeah.
It's the ID of your app. That's how Yelp knows that you are this person.
No, the one below API key.
Oh, your client
The client secret?
Yeah.
It's the secret. So we'll have to look at the documentation to see how we're using it. So Fusion API. So we want to search.
I think it's like your password that they generated for you, but it's hashed. I think.
All right. So if you look at the, so I clicked on Fusion API at the top, and then and clicked on search. So this is essentially, I think, maybe the endpoint we want to talk to. So essentially returns some businesses based on the search, and the search string could be like restaurants, food, etc. And then you can provide all these different information, things like location.
Oh, cool.
How far do you want the search to be, the area, the price, right? So let's see what we get back. So response we get back an object, and then the businesses is a list of things in here. And then we have a rating, we have a price, we have a location, very nice. But notice that the location is an object. We just assume the location was a string in our component, if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
Then it has a distance.
And its ID is actually its name. They don't have its ID is its name.
Where's the ID?
Up above.
All right. But I guess it's more like a hyphenated thing and not just the, so this is the name here.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
That's weird for that to be the ID, because what if there's 2 4-barrel coffees in San Francisco?
Yeah. It's bad design. Yeah, that's interesting that they have. Or maybe this is just mock data and the ID may be slightly different.
Okay.
They may not want to give the exact ID of this restaurant.
I gotcha.
Okay, we'll find out because we're going to actually make a call. Okay, so what do we need to give? We need to also provide the API key or something, right? So businesses, you can also do explicitly give the ID to get the ID. Okay, so I wonder, let's open Postman.
Sometimes it just takes so long. Postman to open.
Yeah.
Because it's snail mail.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, Stephanie, that was pretty brilliant. More of a laugh.
I try. They're too young to understand.
What is mail?
What is mail?
Okay, so let's try searching for something. And so let's say term we want to use is restaurants.
Not found.
All right.
Oh.
So token missing. We need to specify a token. So how do we get a token? That's a GraphQL guides, event endpoints, introduction maybe. Run in Postman, wow. Okay, and you can see some samples too, cool. Using the API.
Is that our token, the secret?
No.
No.
So I think you may have to use the API key to get a token, which is going to be valid for some amount of time. And then, so you have to do this sort of authentication in some way to get the token. So we have the API key. So open up sample.js and put your API key in manage page app from the manage page app. So let's see sample.js. So API key. Oh, maybe not. You just need the API key. Interesting. So yeah.
I'm on their docs page and they're literally switching over from tokens to API keys tomorrow.
Oh my God.
So they're saying as of today, you still need to request a token. As of tomorrow, you don't need to.
That's insane.
Wow, but this is so weird. This is like from 2017 and they just say use your API key. Okay, so there's this Yelp Fusion package that we can use. So if you look at,
I have an API key on my manage app. Does yours not?
it does.
Oh.
But I was, according to the docs that you would, I was assuming that you would need a token, but you can potentially just do it directly. So there's a Yelp Fusion package that we can use. So
we need to require it.
So let's see. Yeah. Node Yelp Fusion. And let's see what the latest version is. It's Node Yelp Fusion. Cool. So you just like give it like Yelp. You just give it the ID and the secret, and then it just essentially gives you an ability to access. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so let's do that. So going back to a restaurant picker, let's do an npm install node Yelp Fusion and save it.
We don't need to do -- save new, right?
I don't know. Does it automatically add it to your package JSON without doing that?
Yeah.
Okay. I was under the assumption it installs it to your local repository. And you do.
What do you mean?
when you just do this, it saves it to your like global packages in your system.
Huh?
When you do this, it saves it to your project.
Really?
Yeah. Or it was like, or it would be like -G2 for the global thing.
Okay.
I may be wrong.
But it just did.
It did?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've heard that
Now it does?
-- save is deprecated, or the
Got it. Okay.
I don't know.
--dev is different.
But also --save isn't necessary anymore. I don't know. I stopped using it a while back.
--dev over there?
Here's --dev.
Okay, actually, you know what? I'm just going to rename, let's rename Yelp config and rename it to Yelp API. And then let's also say import. So import Yelp, and then we say I guess we need the secret key as well. Manage app. So you'll have to get your own secret key from there and then put it in here. So ideally, we don't want to put this on the front end stuff. You want to put this on the back end, but let's ignore that for now. Because when Webpack is going to bundle your application, this is going to be bundled as part of the application. So everybody would have access to your secret key.
API key.
I just missed what you said about everybody having access.
I was going to say that usually you would not put like these secret configs on the front end. All your API requests would happen on the back end. And you would, expose an API from your front end to talk to your back end without having to need an API key. So your backend server is the one which would actually make a request to Yelp. And the front end would just make a call to your server to say, hey, I want to make a request to find restaurants. You'll implement like a wrapper over the Yelp API, or an abstraction over the Yelp API. So that way, the secret key and everything would live on your backend, and your front end wouldn't know about it. But since that's going to take some time to implement, let's like hack our way out of it. So we can say.
The other thing is you would never put it in plain text in a file that you were going to commit to GitHub, because then anybody scraping GitHub to get your keys as well.
Yeah, unless it's a private repo, of course.
Unless it's what?
It's a private repo, then you can.
Oh yes, that's true.
Or should we make a hidden file?
What's that?
Like if ignore, should we make a hidden file?
Which one? This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's possible too. But the idea is that this would get bundled because this is part of your JavaScript code. When Webpack runs, it's going to essentially add this secret key into the bundle.js file.
Mm-hmm.
So anyone kind of can like look at the bundle.js and literally can get access to this key. So you don't want to have this in the front end at all. But we're doing a shortcut hack here just to get this working, and then we can do a refactoring later on to move this to the back.
Cool.
It should make you very nervous to see those in your file, though. It makes me very nervous.
Wait, so what would be the alternative?
We're gonna fix it later.
The alternative would be to like add all of this to the back end.
Have it in a database?
No, it would just be invisible to the front end.
Like a .env file.
So it would just be like behind a wall to say, hey, give me Yelp suggestions, and then the backend would just give it. And then backend is the one which would use the secret and all of that to make the calls to Yelp.
Gotcha.
And that wouldn't be known to the outside world. It would only be known to the people behind the wall of the backend. So that way you're making
and then
it.
Also, I'm sorry if you just said this, but also put it in a .env file or some other way of putting it in a file that's not committed to Git,
Right.
that you can then read into this file, and it's not all on GitHub for the world to see.
Gotcha.
Cool. So I'm wondering, is this ID the API key or is it the client ID? We shall find out. Okay, so let's try client ID.
Okay.
Secret is secret key. And then I'm going to say Yelp dot search term is Burma Superstar. Okay. So what are we doing here? We are essentially initializing our Yelp, the package is going to return us an instance of this class called Yelp under the hood. And then that class has a function called search that we're going to use. And because we pass in the client and secret ID, now that's sort of been, so this is sort of a closure, right? Or like the client and the secret key is now sort of closed inside of this Yelp object. So whenever we do a search, it's automatically going to use the client and secret key every time. So you don't have to specify it each time. So that's why this package is useful. And then you can just pass in all of these different options. And it automatically constructs the API URL and stuff. So you don't have to think about all of that. Right? Otherwise, you had to manually construct the whole URL. You have to make a call to api.yelp.com/v3, blah, 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 and then add the search term to it and do all of those things. This package is just like abstracting that away for you. And I'm sure this is a very, very simple package. So if you just want to like look at the code, you should just like go ahead and do it. Like just literally like probably one file here, like 127 lines of code. So it's a good package to kind of look at and see, oh, this is like an actual production library that people are using. And it's only 128 lines long. So if you understand it, you've understood a production library, which is cool. So if you ever have, to make some, so if you ever have like a API that you want to expose to developers, you can like look at this and see how that they've done it and then just emulate it. 128 lines of code. Cool. So we have this file here and we are making a call. We're explicitly searching for this restaurant. But in order to trigger this, what do we need to do? Like if I restart my application, would this be triggered?
No, don't you need to put it in your browser?
Okay, if I go to my browser.
I need to wrap it in a function and call the function, right?
Well, the function is, this is being called. I am calling .search. This is a function, right? This is a function call. which is a promise, and I resolve it as well.
But we have to send this to our app.js, don't we?
Yeah, you have to import it in our app.js. Right now, it's not being imported at all. So this file isn't being loaded and evaluated at all. It's just a file which exists in our folder, but we are never importing it, so it's never being evaluated. If the file gets evaluated, then this function is going to execute. And then it's going to resolve and it's going to console log the result. But since we are not importing the file, nothing's happening. So what we can do is we can just say import Yelp API from / so go one up Yelp API. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So we just added this line 4. Yeah, Kelsey?
Do you export Yelp API?
Yeah, right now we don't. I mean, we kind of like we're exporting our config, but we don't really care because we're not really using it. We're just importing it for now. So that just that this file gets evaluated. So I could have just done like, I could have, it's just like, if I say require API without actually doing anything, like that just evaluates the file. And that's what I want. I just want to evaluate the file for now. So I can say const foo equal to that, but I'm never really using foo, so it doesn't really matter. So the same thing here, where I'm just calling it Yelp API.
Yeah, you can remove the Yelp API and the from, and you
Right.
can just do import of the file.
Right. Yeah, I can just do this as well.
No, remove the from as well.
All right.
But we're eventually going to be using it, right?
Yeah, we are eventually going to be using it, but not yet.
Sorry.
So, okay, so in our Yelp API, let's say, I was expecting something to happen. Console.log going to make API to call to Yelp. Okay, cool. So we got some error saying fail to load auth token. So maybe this was not the client ID and it was the API key. Nope.
Like I have it to print in my console using the client key, so I know it is the client.
Oh, it is the client key? It's working for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so.
Or sorry, not the client, like client ID. That's what.
All right. Yeah. And it's the secret. So let's go back to the documentation. Oh, we're gonna have to Yelp.search. It's making a post call, interestingly, even though the documentation was using a get. So let's see. So what is different in your code, Patrick?
Mostly that I used like my own starting thing. So I'm running Node and Webpack, and Node is actually serving it. So it printed in the Node.
Got it.
Console, but not the Webpack console.
Got it.
So maybe that's what it is.
Got it. So it's making the call from the backend server for you.
No, it's still doing it on the client side. It just for some reason, like it prints out in when I'm using Node, but it doesn't print out in Webpack. Because I'm using Node Mondo in my server instead of Webpack.
Oh, so you aren't using the React Stephen Guida's repo?
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay, so if you look at the network call going out, authenticate service. No, that's Google API. Okay, wait, let's refresh. Oh, so maybe in our manage app, we need to specify what the URL is going to be. Optional though.
No access control allow origin header. What does that mean?
It means that you're trying to make a post request from the current URL to a different thing. So actually the browser is disallowing it. It's not even Yelp.
Yeah.
Because Yelp doesn't have the header returned saying that this localhost 8080 is allowed to make a post request.
Oh, okay.
Unless.
Yeah, like I'm still getting that error on like the browser,
Right.
But when Node evaluates the file, it's fine.
Right.
It can print it out in the Node.
Because it's doing it on the back end, right? Because it's bypassing the browser. Okay, so maybe we do need to implement the server, the backend server. Unless, let's try to say localhost 8080 here. If we do this.
This is where you ran into trouble when I tried. And it must start with the HTTPS.
Great. Yeah, it doesn't like the fact that we're using localhost or specifying the port.
It probably looks like a www.
And it puts a HTTPS instead of HTTP.
Why does it want so many things? Why does it need all of that?
Yeah, it works with HTTPS.
With localhost 8080?
It says invalid.
Okay. The client secret is going away. This is what you were talking about?
Yeah.
Where's my client secret going?
Prior to December 7th, API used OAuth. Effort to simplify authentication starting March 1st. So prior to December 7th, so I guess after December 7th, they started this new thing. And then starting March 1st, they only do that. So you had like 3 months to migrate or change, update your code. So get your client secret. Oh, you just put an API key in the request header as authorization bearer. Okay, so maybe let's try you directly making the API request instead of using that node library. So do we have Axios in here? Oops. Or we can just use fetch for now. So let's say we say use fetch. Let's go back to our Fusion API, search. Okay, so this one. So making a fetch request to this one. api.yelp.com/v3 businesses search.
Where'd you find it?
I clicked on Fusion API and then clicked on search. Then.
How come yours is a lot shorter than mine? We don't need the developer's documentation.
Did you click on Fusion API?
And then I clicked on search.
You clicked on search. And you copied this one?
Oh no, I copied what was up in the window. Sorry. My bad. Got it.
Okay. we provide headers, and it said, what did it say? So authorization.
You really need a charger.
Did I what? Oh, I need a charger. Okay.
This one.
That was you.
Whoops. I think Fetch has a way of just directly specifying headers like this, and it has like another way of like saying new headers. I forget I don't know if this is going to work, but we can try. Yeah?
Almost.
No?
So we still need line 7, the const Yelp equals new Yelp.
Yeah, we probably don't need that. We probably don't even need this. Yeah, can I test and see if this is working? So let's refresh the page. Oh, we need to say method is get. So, even the get request made. Okay, how about this? Okay, let's try another way to do this. So I think it's not allowing you to do it because of it's blocking the request because it's coming. The referrer is localhost 8080. So the browser is blocking it, which is weird actually. What if I change this to HTTP? Failed to load. So let's see, Yelp API making a request from the browser. So in order to Yelp API, you need to make requests from a server, not a browser. So it sounds like there's no way to get past this CARS error using client-side code. So that's the issue. Fusion.js notes. Right, so this is your browser. So this is nice. It has a block diagram here. So essentially what I would suggest, like initially saying, what we actually want to do is like make the request from this application server. So the server makes a request to Yelp and then gets back the results, and then the server sends it back to the browser. So that way the browser is never directly making a request to Yelp. It's doing it via the server. So that way all the credentials could live in your server, and that would never be exposed to the outside world. That just means that we have to like do more work. So this is what they're saying. So what this person wants is to directly talk to thing, and then they're probably going to do some hacky way of trying to do that.
Possible workaround.
Okay, I think it's probably best to
do it the right way.
Do it the right way. That way everyone gets to understand the pros and cons of that approach. So that would mean we need to create another backend server app. So let's do npm. What can we do? Can we? Yeah, I guess we can start from scratch. So mkdir, we can call it Yelp. What was the name of our app?
Restaurant picker.
Oh, you know what? Like, let's actually create a server folder and a client folder in our directory. So inside source, let's create a new folder called client. And let's create a new folder called server. And let's move source start to or source slash star actually to client.
Is it your client folder inside of source?
Yeah.
But you're wanting to move source into the client?
I want to move everything inside of the source folder into the client folder. So actually, let's maybe remove directory source client.
So client needs to live on the same level as source, right?
Actually, that worked. Okay. What's that? So you can just do this. Move source star to client.
You want everything that's in source to go into client.
Yeah.
And so then source is going to be empty, or source will be in client as well.
No, source would have client in it. So I want. So this is the command I executed.
Oh, and this is outside of your actual folder?
Yeah, this is I'm in the root. I'm in my project. Yelp restaurant picker. Move source star to source client.
src/star to src client. So wait, what? I just renamed something. It says invalid argument.
Yeah, that's fine. So it was trying to move client into client, and it was not possible. So it ignored that folder. So now if you do an ls and go into source and do an ls -l, you'll see that there's only a client in there. And now your client has all of these folders. Actually, server has gone in there too. So let's actually remove server, remove dir server. Okay, this is what I want my source folder to look like. So this is inside my source folder. I should have a client directory, and inside my client directory, all of my files that I was working with are inside of that. And then I have an empty folder called server, which has nothing yet.
So server somehow ended up in my client, as long as index in the Yelp API, like everything ended up in client.
Yeah, then that's fine. That's good.
Even servers in client, and that's okay?
Yeah, so you need to move server out of client and put it
back in source?
Back in source, yeah.
Okay. So now server, there's another client. So now inside source is just a file with client and a folder, client, and a folder server.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Only invalid argument.
Yeah, that's fine. You can ignore that error.
So now our app.js is going to go into our...
you have to ensure that your client and your source directory looks like this.
Style is still in the root level.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone with me? Mm-hmm. Cool. So let's go into our server directory in here. And we're going to create a new file called index.js. And what can we do? Let's copy some code from somewhere which starts our Express server. So let's see. Live coding repos. Server.js. All right, I'm going to post this in Slack. This has a lot of crap in it, but we can just take some of it. So this was in the careers. Oh, sorry. This was in the community Slack.
Oh. Community.
I can also post it in the other one if that makes it easier.
I'm writing community. Which channel? General?
It was in the careers channel.
I'm not a part of that channel.
Okay, I'll just post it in the general thing as well. So
general and community or general back on ours?
General and ours.
Okay. Oof. That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we're gonna delete most of it. So
okay.
So did everyone find that file?
Where is it?
It's in the general channel on our Slack in the message that I posted about the workshop.
Install Express.
Yeah, we're gonna start Express, and we have to install Express too. But like before we do that, let's get rid of some stuff here. So we don't need body parser, database. We don't need render error contacts. Actually, all of this. Maybe except, yeah, all of this.
We just need our app and our Express.
Yeah. We don't need body parser. Yeah, we actually don't need any of this. Except this. We probably don't even need our view engine. Actually, yeah, we could have just typed this out.
We could have just typed it. Wait, so we don't have our app.set anymore. We have our app.use. Express static public.
Install Express.
Yeah, so we need to add npm install express.
It's public. You don't need to get. So you literally erased everything except for the fucking
Yeah.
bottom. Got it.
Okay.
How should I change the port?
It's fine. 3000 is fine.
Good time to stop. Yes.
Yeah, so it's 12 o'clock.
All right.
So just ensure you install npm, install express. And yeah. And we shall continue next time.
Oh.
Are we continuing at 1 or are we next Tuesday?
I think next Tuesday is what I was thinking, but
Okay, that's fine.
yeah. Cool.
Thanks, Puneet.
Oh, yes.
Thank you, yeah.
Thanks, Vinny.
Thanks. Yeah, hope to have done more today, but just kind of, yeah. But it's a good thing. We kind of learned about
what you can't do.
What we can't do, and like we learned about cars. We learned about like why it's important to store credentials on the back end and why not leak them out on the front end. So eventually we're going to have to move our Yelp API file into our backend. So that was the intention. We originally had it on our front end. We can literally transport this file into our backend and things should just work.
Cool.
Thank you. Bye, Amin.